Hey everybody, Breakthrough Health and Life Coach Glenn Hattem here. I am finally back. It's been a little while. I'm looking forward to connecting with everybody, hearing feedback after the show. I'm fortunate today to have my good buddy Silvan here. Silvan is someone that I've known for, geez, Silvan, how long have we known each other for? Has it been like
at least 5 years?
At least 5 years. I feel like we're even like pushing close up on maybe 7 or 8. So
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. We've been in a men's tribe and men's group work and all sorts of things throughout the years, and our paths have crossed with a lot of other remarkable individuals that have had impact in our lives, and we got to watch each other, witness each other grow up, so to speak, and mature. And I don't know how many beards I've seen you transition in and out of. And handlebars, and I never make it full beard. I always get like some fuzz and then I shave it off. But it's been my to my benefit, being able to sit in circle and engage in other activities with you as a man, in a society where until probably coming across you and some of the other outlets, these resources weren't available to me. And so I'm just appreciative that you and I are going to have a conversation here today. You're someone I wanted to have on the show to just talk about your unique path, because you have a very unique story, and then the beautiful work that you're doing in the world, which is having just an enormous impact on people's lives. And every time we're in conversation, hearing about the success stories that you're having with yourself or other or clients that get to work with you, I'm always having coming to mind like, oh, I've got to refer this person to Silvan, because I really feel like you provide a really great, safe container to do some edgy transformational work. And maybe first, just before we I like to drop back in time and kind of hear how we kind of how you started off in the world, your viewpoint, how it's evolved throughout the years and brought you to this type of work you're doing. But maybe share a little bit right now with our audience what you're up to in the world these days, the work that you're doing.
So right now I have a private therapy practice, and I'm trained as a somatic or body-based psychotherapist and a dance movement therapist. And it's kind of complicated words to say that, I'm trained as a talk therapist, but I help people use their body as a resource for their mind and also movement. I mean, every day there's more research that comes out about how important movement is for our psychological well-being. So kind of combining those two in a way that it's not often combined in psychotherapy.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. And yes, it's also very like, if you here's what I do, it's like, what is that? And that's, it's for some folks, it's kind of strange, but when you put it the way you just did, it makes sense that not everything's lodged in our head, that it's actually, there's some work to be done within this body. And, we often think we're just gonna, especially nowadays with COVID times, we're gonna sit on a video call and just, talk about, what's stuck in our head. And you often like to be like, all right, let's get up, let's move the body, let's find out what's going on there. There's a lot of story being told that's solidified, or there's a lot that's embodied of what's going on, whether it's storyline, or I'll let you kind of share a little bit more about that when we kind of lead into that a little bit here. But before, hold on, I'm forgetting something going with the microphone there. All right, hopefully that's better. So, and tell us a little bit about what kind of youngster you were growing up, and what were some of the I think of myself as like, what kind of mischievous things were you up to and getting into, like where did you grow up, and what was kind of the what was the world telling you as a youngster as far as how you needed to navigate life?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in a really kind of unique situation in my home environment. I grew up in kind of an intentional community. There was no religious base to it or anything like that. Kind of more back to the land thing. When people move in, they'd get together, help them build their house, and everybody had gardens and stuff, and we'd have potluck dinners once a week and stuff. And So, you know, a bunch of pretty liberal, open-minded folks from California, Atlanta, places like that, and it's kind of in the foothills of Northeast Georgia, Blue Ridge Mountains, and just on a little dirt road. It was kind of a utopian experience, you know, when I grew up, kind of barefoot, running around in the woods, fishing in the lake. Um, and then I went to public school nearby, you know, when I got old enough to go to school, like kindergarten. And it was a real kind of, I don't know how to, it was a kind of a 180, you know, it was like, I came from a very loving community and family environment, and was in a place where, you know, my strange name and long hair was really not accepted or welcomed, you know. A lot of fundamentalist Christianity, and you know, if you don't accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're going to burn in the fiery pits of hell for eternity. So that was kind of, I went from this like everything is peace and love and, you know, hanging out in the woods, and to that, and I didn't really fit in, to say the least. And there wasn't a lot of acceptance in my experience in public school, and you know, I had a lot of experience being bullied and things like that, in some pretty intense ways. And so a lot of my adult life has been kind of unraveling that, and learning to kind of come back to my own power, because I felt like there's a lot of experience is where, you know, I experienced this kind of like power over in school, where people were, you know, I guess not comfortable enough with themselves, so they're kind of pushing their anxiety or their fear out on, taking it out on someone who's different. And yeah, and I did have a couple of friends in school. You know, interestingly enough, I think I had it easy inward, you know. So yeah, kind of a difficult place to not fit in, you know. And so I think that really inspired me to want to be a teacher, because I had a couple really great teachers. I had a lot of really not so great teachers either. But that inspired me to teach, and ended up being an art teacher for a number of years. And there's some point in my life where I just felt like, I don't know, I guess you want the long story or the short story? Because the long story is.
I think we'll take the middle road on that, because I think
The middle road. Okay. Well, I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's important to mention that, you know, I wanted to be one of the good teachers. I think I was. I think I had an impact on a lot of kids, and just helping them not so much learn how to do different art techniques, which is what I started out teaching. And by the end, I was like, I don't need to teach. You know, most of these kids are not going to be artists, right? So what I really need to teach them is the creative process. As long as you're not just wanting to be a cog in the wheel, you know, you want to use creativity to.
Sparkling water, not a 40 ounce of OE.
You want to use creativity to, you know, have a sense of humor, like Glenn says right there. You know, so I did that for a number of years. I chaired the art department at a prep school in New England for a long time. Had a lot of great experiences there, and then I had a cool experience where I actually lost my job. Like a third of the people at the school lost their jobs because it had big budget cuts, and then I just went and applied to some different schools, and I just was like not really feeling the teaching vibe for some reason as much as I had before. And I went for a walk in the woods in the snow in New Hampshire, where I was teaching, living at this boarding school. And I just had this sense of like, what am I supposed to do? You know, like the teaching thing doesn't really feel right anymore. Like, what do I need to do with my life? You know, and it just hit me that you know, maybe I should. Was always interested in Buddhism and meditation, and so I was like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me to spend some time and really get into that. And I was looking at places all over the world where I could go study, and I actually ended up just across the river from where I was in Vermont. There was a Buddhist meditation center, and I went over there and checked it out, and I ended up living there, doing like a year-long retreat. And it was the most one of the best decisions of my life. I get kind of emotional thinking about it. It was just
Yeah, feeling that.
really, really powerful experience to be there for a whole year, to just kind of sit with my own experience and my own heart, and be in community with people who are doing the same thing, and being more available to the world, more connected. Um, so yeah, I did that, and then kind of a long, winding road from there. A lot of other interesting things, world travels and things, and ended up in Boulder, Colorado, and decided I was going to go back to school to study to be a therapist, and choose somatic in college. If anybody tells you they raced mountain bikes, it also means they crashed mountain bikes.
Right.
So I had a lot of physical, longer term issues with my body from that. So I was either going to go back to school and study to be a massage therapist, or I was also interested in art therapy. And I went to, a friend of mine was like, oh, you got to see my friend who's a somatic and dance movement therapist. And I went and did a session with her, and it was the most holistic healing experience I've ever had in my life. And yeah, so I was like, that's what I got to study. I worked with a company called Windhorse Community Services, which here in Boulder, actually, they have a couple different places around the world. They have centers and really great comprehensive care for people with more intense mental health challenges, working with kind of extreme states like schizophrenia and things like that.
Yeah, you really threw yourself in the fire with that work. I mean, you were like, I'm going to dive into some of the places where most people, really would push their buttons, and but very uncomfortable places you found comfort in. And that, for me, witnessing that, I have a lot of admiration, because I'm like, I don't know if I could have handled that degree of commitment with others with such significant challenges, and really forcing you to really be in your practices, and maybe sharing a little bit with our audience about what that's like, because you found yourself moving a very non-traditional route that's requiring you to level up your game, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it in some ways it was like an easy fit for me, in that people who are working with obvious mental health challenges, like if you walk down the street and you see somebody talking to themselves, they're outcasts in society.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I have a lot of empathy for people like that, from my experience growing up, in this very kind of conservative area, and not feeling outcast, and feeling like I wasn't good enough,
Not just not fitting in. We're talking like outcast. Yeah.
Yeah, like really, like, you don't belong here. You're not good enough. You're not, playing by our rules, so you shouldn't be here. And we're going to put you in your place. And I think people with obvious mental health challenges, it's like society says that to them, in lots of different ways, obvious and more subtle ways, like talk about, around race and things like that. We talk about microaggressions. People with mental health issues. I mean, we say, like, that's crazy. We say that all the time, and that comes from society not, thinking less of people who have mental health challenges. So in that way, I think it was like, it's a kind of an easy fit, and I feel like a lot of my work there is just to like acknowledge the really beautiful and positive parts of people, that seem to be typically are overshadowed by society or their parents or their teachers or whoever telling them like they're not good enough because of their mind works differently or whatever, you know.
Yeah, so you come at somebody not from what's been pronounced as like the main flaws in this individual, but looking at the beauty that's, you know, not getting the attention. And that so these individuals get to experience being seen and heard and felt and cared for and safe with you, and more trusting themselves again.
Right, right. And I think, you know, I think a lot of people are afraid of people that have more obvious mental health challenges because it's a kind of a fine line, you know, between quote sanity and quote not sanity, you know. And I think people are afraid sometimes that maybe they could slip into that, kind of don't associate with it.
Yeah.
But
Almost like it's going to rub off if I
right, right.
Right.
In a more challenging, you know, way that they come across, then I actually have to look at my own stuff too, you know, because we all have them these days, you know. It's like there's a it's hard not to, you know. There's a lot of stress on in our modern lives.
So what are some of the
And I feel like, you know, it could have been. I was just gonna say, it feels like it would have been easy for me in a way to end up with maybe a more challenging mental health state if I hadn't had the resource of really great parents that did really appreciate me for who I was. You know, that kind of was the balance for you know, a really difficult experience in public school growing up. And a lot of people don't have that, you know. So I think my work at Windhorse is a lot of trying to kind of offer that to people, you know, sometimes as adults, you know, this kind of more unconditional acceptance and appreciation that maybe they didn't get growing up.
Yeah, usually by the time you reach adulthood, it's kind of like you know, all those doors close and you're like, this is my, well, this is my place in the world. And your philosophy, your guiding principles have led you to wanting to take care to provide for adults a level of compassion and understanding that in a certain sense, it's more than just healing, but it's opening up what's possible. Mm-hmm. And so how do you like do this work? Like this is hard work. So the training and skill sets you've had to hone throughout the years in your craft to be able to have such a positive impact in people's lives. You know, you talked about having to go inward with others, working inwardly on themselves, and it was a beautiful, but you know, I'm sure messy process of sitting with oneself for a year. Yeah. You know, what are some of the, I guess, what the takeaways, I guess, for our audience as far as like what one starts to discover from spending time with oneself, from shifting your focus from the externals to what is going on with my own internal dialogue that needs some restorative care, and maybe sharing a little bit about your path, just a little bit more, getting a little deeper into some of the grains of this. I think it's because you've had to really lean into some hard edges with yourself, and then also that's also even a hard edge, you know, when we've sat in group and other conversations, like stepping into your own power, your own fierceness, your own clarity, your own calling of what you're supposed to do, and then bumping into your own shit, you know, that comes up and tries to stifle your greatness.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, spending a year in meditation retreat, I think part of it, what I learned is that like, I don't have to be afraid of myself. I don't have to be afraid of different parts of myself. I have lots of different parts of myself, you know, and I don't afraid of pain, you know. I think in Buddhism, they talk a lot about the distinction between pain and suffering. And pain is inevitable, right? It's like you stub your toe, whatever, it's going to happen, right? You get your heart broken, it's going to happen, you know? If, but the suffering is like when we keep thinking about what causes the pain and we keep that storyline going and going, and it keeps us, drags us down. It's how to distinguish like what's pain and what's suffering, and the fact that I can actually handle pain. Suffering is what like really breeds kind of longer term discontent and unhappiness. But actually, in my experience, like happiness comes from actually being able to feel the pain and move through it. And being able to feel the and not try to kind of put dampers on either of those, but to really let ourselves feel whatever's up for us in the moment. But also, and this comes to what I do in my private practice, because basically, I mean, I feel like for the most part, like all I'm doing in my private practice, working with people, regardless of what their mental health challenges they're working with in the moment, it basically comes back to help suppress energy, and oftentimes it'll come out sideways. You know, they're for really suppressing our anger, or we just don't have much energy. We tend to get depressed with emotions, is to suppress them, you know, an unhelpful way to work with them. Another one is to like push it out on other people and other situations, like, oh, it's not my fault, it's like it's this person's fault, it's society's fault, you know, it's, you don't take any ownership of it. And another way is to kind of really overindulge in the thought process or the storyline around it, like, oh, this is never going to change, it's always so horrible, blah blah blah. So being able to get the somatic or the body piece helps people get underneath that. What was that?
You getting stuck in that victim perspective.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. So there's kind of like we tend to kind of fall into one of those three traps of like how to work with emotions, because frankly, most of us were never really taught how to work with our emotions, you know. Definitely not something I learned in North Georgia, my rural public school upbringing, you know.
It's very, very counterintuitive, and we're taught to get relief, because, you know, I'll project on you the parts I don't want to feel coming up in me. And so it means I'm going to attack or manipulate the outside world because I don't have a skill set of how to actually sit with disturbing feelings that could be revealing to me, and could have historical data that says, oh, this really has nothing to do with actually what's going on right now so much. It actually has to do with some older stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, I think that's my upbringing, and having that experience being bullied. I feel like if those people that were bullying me growing up, if they had those tools to be able to work with and own their own emotional experience, they wouldn't have had to push it out on someone else.
Right.
You know? So that was really a big part of what led me down the path of being a therapist. And, you know, I'm still, another side gig of mine is teaching meditation to teachers, mindfulness and stress reduction to teachers. So when they're actually able to embody that, you know, they can also teach it to their students. It's a great group out of Baltimore, Holistic Life Foundation, and they serve like, I don't know how many thousands of kids in inner city Baltimore, and they're doing just that. They're teaching them how to work with their emotions. And it's amazing to hear some of the stories from those guys of, you know, how they changed the whole culture of the school, to one of like, you know, it's not cool to be beaten on people, you know, it's not how you show that you're a man, you know? So yeah.
I was kind of the opposite. Silvan knows this, is like, I'm like, their emotions, you know, before I developed skill set to be with my emotions, it was like, all right, I'm gonna throw my 40-pound vest on, I'm gonna go around in the mountain, you know, and that's how I'll deal with my disturbing emotions until they're grinded out, and I back clear thinking. And so for the moment, I've pushed, suppressed those emotions, and I'm back to, the current, means or baseline that allows me to deal with life. And it's like, I'm missing the fucking boat. It's like you're self-medicating, self-soothing, and using external resources to deal with something that really, actually, the counterintuitive thing is like, I'm having this emotion coming up that's in my body. Maybe I should just be curious about it and hang out with that emotion and see if I can find some degree of calmness with sensations that might feel like, if I lean towards them, they're going to be annihilatory. But to discover that these things might actually provide some, it's like the anxiety might have some information from you coming up from the subconscious that's trying to be revealed to you to help you direct yourself into better choices, new possibilities. That's been, so my experience is, gone all the way on this extreme, got so far, only know is actually I had to go to a completely different direction to really find what I was looking for, and going into the body and discovering, I always kind of use the example of the acorn, where, this acorn has the history of all the trees, and it has all the future saplings and trees that are going to be grown. And right here in this moment, like in this acorn, like holds in the body, holds everything, the history, the future, and in this present moment, the unfolding of something new that wants to happen. And if we could just kind of, it's often we're trying to, discover the present moment to create something, but really we're just trying to remove us getting out of the way of, and our ability to hear a little deeper into the deeper wisdom that's always here and always exists in the present moment, is always here. It doesn't need to like arrive or anything. It's just, we just need to kind of clear out the junk. And I think there's a lot of moving the body allows one to clear out the junk, and maybe sharing a little bit about, I guess, how this, like what this movement work has done for you, first off, before we even get into like what it's done for your clients, but how it impacted you and what you started kind of connecting some dots, some big ones. So,
yeah, I mean, the theory of somatic psychotherapy is basically that, when we have traumatic experiences and they're not processed, they can get stored in areas of tension or lack of, our bodies can get kind of like stuck in this pattern of creating stress hormones that we needed to kind of like get out of an emergency situation, but then you're not in the emergency situation anymore, but your body's just used to producing them. And your mind kind of keeps you on alert sometimes.
Yeah.
So one thing is just like shaking, just letting your body move. And, it could be dancing, could be running, but it could be also just like really shaking your body. I mean, there's this guy, Peter Levine, who's kind of one of the pioneers of somatic therapy. And, he studied the footage, like nature footage of like, when the lion catches the gazelle, right? Usually they show, the lion catching the animal, but he studied all the footage of when the animal gets away and what the animal does after it gets away and it's not in this emergency situation anymore. And they always shake. The animals shake, and it's to get that stress hormone out of the body, because it's not healthy for us to be toting around all the stress hormone in our body. It's used for, really, it's meant to be there for an emergency situation, and then we don't need it anymore. If we keep carrying it around in our bodies, then that's because we don't know how to deal with everyday stresses, for instance, and we're not connected to our body and the way it naturally wants to move, then we can have all this stress hormone built up in the body and cause all kinds of physical health issues as well as mental health challenges.
So kind of like in our society, a lot of meds are taken to suppress symptoms, and we're in a suppression society where there's a lot of conditioning to suppress. And obviously, if we suppress, it doesn't leave the body. We're carrying it around to the next circumstance, and now we get triggered a little quicker, things heightened, more than they should, more exaggerated. And so there's this, this calling for us to express out. And maybe that comes out in a messy way, but we need to express things out. We need to have a continued process for things for life moving through us, coming across our path, so to speak. And if we don't have ways to interrupt these patterns, and if you record a pattern so many times over, you do that 1,000 times, this is how I deal when this situation comes about, well, you can count on that pattern in autopilot. And whether it serves you in a positive way or not, it's getting ingrained in. And then you're like doing these one-offs of some good, I'm going to, be positive about this, and I'm going to make this appropriate behavioral modification. And we wonder why it doesn't stick, because we've tried something 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So maybe share a little bit about, your practice and the work. And
right. So there's an underlying emotional experience that's like not being dealt with. And if you're not relating to that, then it's going to be harder to move forward in your life, because it's going to be running you kind of subconsciously in the background, right? So mostly a lot of what I do in my private practice work is help people experience. So if we're doing one of those 3 maladaptive patterns of like pushing it out or on somebody else, or suppressing it, or overindulging in a storyline around it, then we're not actually feeling it directly in our body. So basically we basically experience emotions through sensations in the body. Like a real easy example of that is like, if you get pissed off, you're probably going to feel heat. You might feel tension in your body. You might feel elevated heart rate. All those are like body sensations that are telling you, oh, I'm pissed off.
Pause for a second. So when one gets pissed off, we might be, oh my gosh, I don't want to get pissed off right now at work or with this person here, because when I get angry, I might be a loose cannon, or I'm gonna express it in an inappropriate way and cause damage or harm to myself or the other person or the situation. And yet that heat, that fiery hot energy, there's kind of like, and oftentimes for me, it's like, oh, there's a hell no in here about something. There's maybe something that's there's a lot of information there. So there's all this active intelligence in the body that you could be really trying to, traditionally ignore and disconnect from.
Yeah. And where we live here in Boulder, Colorado, this beautiful place, a lot of interesting, open-minded folks studying really interesting, cutting edge things. But there is also this sense of like, oh, we shouldn't get angry, right? I think a lot of that is because we see how people in places of power aren't in control of their anger, and they use it to, they let their anger, be abusive to people. And similar, I think, anger and power. I think people equate that like a misuse of power with being angry. I think misnomer, because if you're not allowing yourself to get angry, you're actually suppressing a lot of energy that you could use to move forward with your life. It's more like you got to tap into that energy and understand how to work with it and transform it into energy that you can use, kind of transforming anger into personal power, if you will. But in order to do that, it's you have to have some tools. It's not something you can just like, oh, I'm just going to transform my anger into personal power. It's a real skill that we're not taught. So yes, there are certain situations where a lot of anger is there for a reason, right? And that's why I don't encourage people to suppress it, right? Because there's some kind of protective quality.
Yeah.
When we get angry, right? There's some kind of boundary.
We were just talking about. Prior to this call, we were talking. Silvan and I were talking earlier. I was sharing about an experience I had recently where it was like, oh, there was like a boundary violation, and there was actually like, okay, I'm processing and getting through what had occurred, but there was this anger there that I was when I really checked in with myself. The anger was saying, hey, there's a boundary violation. There's a safety issue. And so, it's like, oh, here's this emotion that, it could be expressed in an ugly way or an incorrect way. It could be used as power over with others and abuse, or it could be actually like a really good, like hit or hint from the wise mind, the internal compass that's trying to tell you, hey, listen to how could you handle this situation differently? Because the situations, if you don't take time out to analyze the experiences that you're having in your life, you don't take time to hit pause and reflect on things, and you go to either the overindulgent or you go to the projection, you're not going to have an opportunity. You're missing an opportunity to grow. It's almost like, I've come to experience when there's a disturbance, that's time to lean in and grow. It's like, ooh, I just got a gold nugget, a treasure trove that I know there might be this upset feeling and sensations in my body, but like, this is an opportunity for some massive growth and expansion and freedom and all these like great things if I'm willing to do the work. If I can use the tools I would learn with someone like Silvan, the skill sets to kind of lean in and find out there's some information there that I can access, and I can transform my life. I can transmute that energy and
yeah. And good for you, dude, for leaning into the anger, and letting that be there, because oftentimes, I think, especially, we talk about men, men's work that we do in circles where we are more kind of, what you might call people who are trying to be more conscious, oftentimes we don't want to be angry because we don't want to be that guy who's, abusing people or whatever, whether that's verbally or physically, but actually, if we skip the anger and you go straight to sadness, for instance, or forgiveness, it's like a spiritual bypass. You're just kind of like, oh, everything's fine. I don't need to I shouldn't be angry, and you lose a lot of energy, and that you lose that energy that could be used, like in your case, it could, instead of being like, oh, this was a horrible thing and it was so bad, and I'm probably a bad person because I was in this situation and I didn't have good enough boundaries or something. Instead of that, if you actually let yourself be pissed, like, oh, this should not have happened, and I'm actually going to use this energy that I have because I'm pissed off, and I'm actually going to use this to like reflect on this situation and figure out how I can prevent that from happening in the future, how I can use that energy to have stronger boundaries for myself.
Yeah, and I was even just sharing earlier with Sylvan how like I literally sat in my car and had a conversation with myself saying, hey, I'm going to learn something from this situation right here that empowers me, that I'm, it's not, it's like the circumstance didn't even matter. All it mattered was like I was spending time with the energy, and the truth was like I was pissed because I went against like it was just, there was something that needed I needed my own like trust and self-care magnified, and wasn't able to do it in that situation. I don't want to go into it, but good.
But being able to own that, right, is a huge, mark of growth, right? That it's like, I'm pissed off and I can feel pissed off, and I don't have to blame it on this person who did this thing, even though the thing they did was out of line, right?
Right.
But you can actually take control of the situation and learn from it and grow from it by taking responsibility for your own emotional experience.
Yeah, because I'm like, in the end of the day, I'm like, I don't even care. It doesn't have nothing to do with that person. It has to do with like how I want to learn from this and transform and expand. I love that saying, it's not win or lose, it's, win or grow. And so it's like, okay, so how can I grow? How can I, win or learn? What can I learn from this situation? So the next time, because life always does it, like brings around another situation to just test your commitment, your ownership of these these innate qualities that are in all of us that want attention. So as you were sharing earlier, like there are all these parts of you, and so we all have the whole rainbow, whole spectrum of these parts of ourselves, and we just own these aspects of ourselves because maybe they got rejected by societal conditioning or even our own takeover. Once you stop getting bullied, you're like, oh, I'll just continue the bullying myself. And so there's this aspect of of whatever you disown about yourself is coming back. You're a fully integrated being, and we've got to own all aspects of ourselves, and we got to hold space for all those parts and all these parts. When we can do that, when we can own everything about us, the good, bad, and ugly, all these things, we can start to celebrate life more. We can start to be more free. We can experience more abundance and prosperity. We can experience more ability to get our own needs met with ourselves, to fall in love with ourselves, to find that tranquility. In the Boulder community, we use words like sovereignty and all these other things, but there's a way to really, I think all of us, want to be at more inner peace. There's the experience you have in the world, and then there's your whole, as Silvan's been talking a lot today about, your interpretation of that pain or those experiences. And that's where, like, I always find work with the clients that I work with coaching, it's like, we got to work your interpretation of what's going on. Like, it's what's going on between your ears, and you dropping into your heart space is where our work, is at, and we'll make these appropriate behavioral modifications or belief shifts, but we've got to look at, like, what's going on, like how you're experiencing the world and projecting and creating your experience of others and life. So
yeah, great. Yeah, that piece of kind of like, we're always going to get knocked down, right? That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. It's I think it was John Kabat-Zinn, and he said, "You can't control the waves, but you can learn to surf."
yeah.
And so that's kind of what I do in my work, really, I think. And I think a lot of what you're helping people learn to do too, Glenn, is you get knocked down and you get back up again, but in order to really surf really skillfully, right, you have to be able to connect with your emotional experience. And for me, in my experience, it's like the only way to really do that is to let go of the storyline and be with the emotion in the body. So the story or the thoughts around the emotion can be really helpful to help us connect with it initially. But then we got to take a little bit of time. It's not that the thoughts are unimportant. They are. We can come back to them. But in order to really experience emotion, we have to let go of the thoughts and feel it, and feel the sensations around it in the body. And it might be really painful, like physically, like gut wrenching. People feel like intense stuff in their stomach. This whole broken heart thing is like, it's a real feeling, and being able to actually hang out there and feel that, and the thoughts come up, see if you can let them go again, and stay with the sensations in the body. Then typically they have an opportunity to move, and other emotions can come in. We realize that as painful as that emotion was, it's not going to kill us. We can feel it, and then there can be space for other experiences to come in. But if we don't do that, then there's all this baggage, emotional bags that we're carrying around that can make it more difficult to move forward in our lives.
And we get caught up overindulging in those thoughts and those storylines, and we can't. It's very hard to change a story inside a story. So by giving it's almost like saying, okay, I hear all these thoughts. In fact, I've entertained those yesterday and the day before. Let me just put those on a shelf for a moment. Trust that those thoughts will be there, and I'm going to go be with the kind of like the symptoms, so to speak, how these things are landing on the body. So it can be almost a strategy that one might have to avoid things by just spinning those same storylines and thoughts. They're like, you think you're actually being with stuff? No, you're not. You're actually like hanging out in this thought process and that stream of thought. And what Silvan's suggesting here is like actually like acknowledging that those thoughts are there, and then actually being with the sensations. Like you said, they can be really uncomfortable. It can be nauseating, could be really, like a pit in your stomach, or an ache, in your chest and back, or all kinds of things that legitimately we're like, this is painful. This is really so uncomfortable. I'd be more comfortable just talking about the dialogue of it. And often we do that in groups,
Exactly. Yeah.
like trying to pop out of that.
Yeah, and that keeps you, as long as you're just talking about it, keeps it up here in the head, and you're not actually
Not done.
feeling the emotion fully in the body, which is what needs to have. So
Sylvan,
people can talk circles.
well, Sylvan, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to? I like to say, stalk you online at midnight, and learn about you.
Right.
And get some
Well,
information. Yeah. How would they find
but
it?
tell me, this was the time's up cue. I could talk about this stuff forever because it's fascinating to me, and it's been so much for me on the of like all the different conversations we could have. Easiest way right now for people to find me is just my Psychology Today profile. So if you can add a link to that, that'd be great.
Okay. So Psychology Today, how would they find you on Psychology Today? Maybe just tell everybody.
Yeah, so it's just my full name, Silvan Erb-Summers, quite long.
Just spell it out.
SILVANERB-Summers, Erb, and yeah, Psychology Today is usually the first thing that pops up when you do.
Great. And I know you're putting together a fancy new website, so that'll be live here shortly as well too, just because you're doing a lot of amazing things. But the Psychology Today is definitely a fast track to get a hold of you and get connected. And yeah, how does it work if someone's on the fence and they're like, oh, I've watched this podcast and I'm really curious to learn about this movement therapy. It really seems to make sense on like the somatic side of things, but like I'm a little nervous about like movement therapy, with this. This seems like a great guy,
I mean, and I really think dance movement therapy is kind of like does what people like me do a disservice. It's not a great name. I think movement therapy is pretty good, but movement can look like your hand or breathing. I rarely dancing around my office though. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's most of the people that come to me actually don't come to me because I'm a somatic therapist. Some mental health challenge work, and it tends to be really helpful.
Yeah, I like movement therapy, and I don't know if I do dance, it's probably referred mostly as movement. So, but I would say, yeah, the work that you do, you just it just happens to be one of the many things that you bring out in your arsenal to support someone, and you listen to like what's needing to happen there. So I think for anyone wanting to work, that's they're gonna have an experience that's unique to your guys' dynamic and what's needing to happen there to what's going on. So I would highly recommend reaching out to Silvan for a connection call to see what might be the steps moving forward, get informed, and you make a decision there. So I just want to thank you, Silvan, for being here. Thank our audience for listening in. Hopefully this has been a fun conversation to share along with, and we'll see you on the next episode. I'll be sharing a little bit about my Devil's Tower adventures and my successful summit recently. Probably on the next episode, I've been storing that for a book that I have coming out here shortly this summer. But tune in to the next episode, and then yeah, just thank you, Silvan. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon. See you, everybody. Okay. Okay.